Welcome everyone to episode 11 of the Distance Learning Playbook Unpacked. Episode 11, so cool. We're over 10 now, into double digits. It's pretty exciting. But we're most excited because today we have Rebekah Whittaker with us, and she is going to talk about how do we get students to turn their freaking camera on because they want to live in their little black box world and roll around on the floor and jump on the bed and things like that. So Rebekah, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your tips and tricks with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I am excited to be here.
And Rebekah, you are our very first elementary school teacher to appear on the podcast. So that is a celebration in itself. And I'll just remind our audience that you can always drop into our clinic on every Thursday from 3 to 4. The link is in the slide deck and on our website. So you should have a link to our website with all of our episodes and the link to join the clinic hours if you so desire.
That's right. That's right. And we did hear that somebody got a link with it didn't actually go to the website, so you couldn't get the slide deck. So just email us and we can help you with that. Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, Cassidy, tell us about the playbook. What does the playbook say?
Yeah, let's start with the playbook, right? So the distance learning playbook talks a little bit about cameras on, kind of. So I pored over the playbook and I was like, at some point, they're going to tell us how to get students to turn those cameras on, right? Of course, at some point, there has to be a way to do this. And I went through the playbook and really all I found was that agreement, those norms, right? The idea that we co-construct norms and agreements for how we are and how we act during synchronous class time. So that probably could include turning cameras on. I'm looking at our slide deck and I'm missing a word because I did a quick edit here. Considerations should be fill in the blank. How about made, right? Made for students for whom turning on their camera is going to be problematic. And I think teachers, we trust teachers' professional judgment to know if turning on a camera is difficult for a student. And I think, Rebekah, you'll probably have a bit more to say about that. But the distance playbook basically just said, don't force every single student to turn on their camera if you know that there's a reason why that camera is off. And I think for teachers, that's common sense for us. The other thing that the playbook says is that they ask students either to turn their camera on or use their school picture. And I thought that was interesting because I haven't seen my kids being asked actually to do either turn their camera on or use their school picture, but I can see how in cases where bandwidth is a problem or for whatever reason students aren't turning their camera on, I can see how it would be really beneficial to the teacher and to the community, the classroom community, for students to use their school picture if their camera is off. And then the distance learning playbook also points out that most students, when they are in breakout rooms, turn their cameras on so that they could see others. And I have to say, that I am a believer in the distance learning playbook and I am a fan. I got to tell you, I'm not sure that I agree with that. I'm not sure that that's what I've seen. So that's what the playbook says. So clearly there's some more work to be done around getting students to turn on their cameras. And so that's why we invited Rebekah Whittaker to come join us today. Because Rebekah, tell us, who are you and why should we listen to what you have to say about turning cameras on?
Well, I don't know that you should listen to me, but here I go anyway. I'm a fourth grade teacher. I teach at Chavez Elementary for the 4J school district. And I've just been experimenting with this. So like everybody else, I started out bright-eyed thinking that kids would have their cameras on, excited to see each other, excited to see me, their favorite new teacher. And of course, we were living in the black box world. So I wanted about 5 weeks in to have a conversation with my class about how do we make our Zoom meetings feel more like a real classroom? Because we were having maybe a third of kids turn their cameras on, maybe about, oh no, can I do fraction math right now on the spot? 22 kids,
I bet you can.
About 8 or so turn their cameras on. And we didn't feel connected. And this is a new class for me. So I want to know who these students are and see them and talk with them and build relationships. And that was feeling like a real struggle. But I did not want to, like you said, force anyone to turn their camera on. We can't force kids to turn their camera on. And really, more than anything, I wanted to have an outcome where they want to have their camera on and they want to come to school and see each other. So I just started experimenting and tried out a few different things, and we're still in the process of it.
Sweet. So let's hear about some of these things. I'm excited.
So I started off by creating a Google Slides interactive presentation because I really feel like charts fix everything. And I was like, if I can just chart this out, maybe we can make some progress. So I wanted the style of the discourse to be low pressure, but high stakes. So not putting pressure on individual students to feel like they immediately needed to start turning their cameras on in Zoom, but really frame it in, what do we want school to feel like when we come and meet each other every day? And what does it feel like when we come to school and see each other and talk with each other versus when we come to school and we see only a few kids or no one's really talking? And what does that feel like to us? And how does that translate into also our learning and how we're able to learn? So I think you might have a few slides of what I showed the kids. I just put up snapshots of various Zoom meetings. So in this first one, these are class Zooms. So I asked the kids, what are you noticing in these pictures? What are you wondering? Which I stole those two terms from Cassidy. Obviously, we use them in the teaching community all the time. But when I made the slideshow, I thought, I remember Cassidy bringing up noticing and wondering. So I put these up, I numbered them. I asked for kids to look, take a few moments, and then either type in the chat what they noticed about the different pictures and also what they wondered. And these are slides I shared with other teachers as well. So in the teaching notes, I laid out sort of where I was hoping we would go with the conversation. So at the end, if you're not hearing a lot of commentary, you can share some of your own noticing and wonderings. So for example, I said in number 5, I noticed they all have their hands up the same way. I'm wondering if they're playing a game or what's happening there. I noticed in number 2, there's a lot of cameras off, and I'm wondering, are those kids or people in the meeting and what's happening with them? So that's where we started. This is the first slide we looked at as a class.
This aligns really well with what the distance learning playbook says, though, because it sounds to me like you are establishing norms with your class in showing them these pictures. And I love how these aren't snapshots of their Zoom, because I would imagine they're sort of used to seeing their class, and that's become normal to them to see all of those black boxes and those names and those 8 students with their cameras on. So I love the objectivity of this, because they're really seeing it then from your perspective.
Yeah, and I wanted to take a big
teacher
step back from our class dynamic, because I didn't want them to feel like they were under a fishbowl and like, what's happening in our class with cameras? I want to take a big step back and be like, all over the country, kids are meeting together for their class each day, just the way we are. What does that look like, for all types of different classes? And I hoped that it also removes some of the sensitivity or feeling defensive about why I have my camera off or why I don't, and bring out that sort of objectivity of like, let's step back and look at what different Zoom classes can look like. And
how did the students respond? Like when you gave them this prompt, what was the response like?
Yeah, so I had really high hopes, just like at the beginning of the year, that everyone would have their cameras on. And it was like, crickets. It's crickets. So I was like, what do you guys notice? What are you wondering? With all of my elementary school enthusiasm. And it was just silent. So I was like, let's pop over to the chat and maybe people are adding responses there. Crickets. So I just kept going. I went to the next slide. I got more responses on the next slide. But what I did not give up.
Should we see the next slide?
Yes.
Is the next slide? Okay.
But the silver lining is I turned these slides into an assignment. I put them on Seesaw and I got responses from almost everyone. So the takeaway there is that, again, kids may not feel safe in being vulnerable and sharing live in Zoom, but if you offer it to them in another context, they may feel more comfortable. And I got almost immediate responses from the majority of my class in Seesaw. And kids recorded themselves talking, they typed in their responses. So I do think this works, but I think you have to be willing to kind of change it up. You might have a class that wants to talk and you might have a class that doesn't. Okay, in these slides, you guys, well, what do you notice and wonder about these slides? Just turn it over to you guys.
I noticed in number 4 that everybody's got kind of a forced smile of some kind, and so I wonder if it was just like everybody smile for the camera, we're gonna take a picture now. So that's what I was noticing and wondering.
I notice that just looking at 3, I mean, it's sort of like draining my will to live. Looking at 3, like it's just a vacuum, and even 2. Like if I compare 2 to 1 or 4 or 5, I mean, even that difference, the names being in those places, just the fact that I can see some students there, but I can't see them, I don't know. It definitely has an effect on you as a facilitator and as a teacher.
Yeah, and I think it gets to the heart of what is a classroom. And when we can't see or hear each other, is that a classroom? Is that a learning environment? Is that a social environment? And then on the next set of slides, we looked at individual students' interactions with Zoom. And
so this one?
Oh, whoops. Oh, maybe it was back a slide or two. There's one where it's just the kids' faces. And if it's not in there, I'll just describe what it is. It shows individual students on Zoom. So like one student has a book up they're sharing with the teacher, and another one, the kids are like peering in really close, and it has like a sibling and they're trying to see something on the Zoom screen. And then my favorite, wait for it, is a child who's just, laying back on their chair, looking up at the ceiling, not engaged at all. And so, and there was another with a kid with a bag on his face with like a smiley face. So that elicited a lot more discussion. Kids were like, oh, my sibling tries to come and see what's happening in my Zoom too. Or, why is that kid taking a nap during the Zoom? I'm like, I don't know. So it also just brought it down to like the learner level. How do you get the most out of Zoom? What are some of the different experiences we're having as individuals?
Yeah.
And we're not able to show all of the slides that you're talking about, but we are going to link the slideshow that you use into this slideshow. Thank you for that, as a reference for teachers to use. So
yeah, that's cool.
That'll be in our slide.
I would imagine there's just a sense of like class culture too, where you said you might have a class that just talks a lot and there's one class that doesn't. And there's a bit of that where there's this, my son who's in college and he's in a class, he was talking about how nobody would say anything in this class because everyone was scared to look dumb. But in this other class, everybody's talking. And so sometimes it's just the way, or whoever is willing to break that silence, get it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I love that. I mean, essentially co-constructing of the norms. And thank you for giving us the suggested way to differentiate that. Maybe that's something we can facilitate in Zoom in our synchronous, but maybe if that doesn't work, I love how you quickly pivoted and turned it into seesaw asynchronous work.
I was determined that slideshow was going to yield something. I really did want to hear from them. I wanted to hear their ideas. And and then on this slide, this is the second part of really the workshop that we did because this took place over a few weeks. We started building in some tech skills. So we looked at what are some ways that you guys can help lead and run our Zoom meetings. And what I didn't explicitly say was some of these require cameras on. It just tends to be that way in the role. And so kids can co-host, they can share their screens, what I have found a lot of kids like to do is record themselves teaching a mini lesson like, hey guys, I figured out how to change my name in Zoom. And they love to post it to the blog in Seesaw. So when I say, can I bring that over to Zoom and show that on Zoom? That's another way for their face and their participation to get out there that isn't just turning the camera on.
That's so interesting.
Like giving them a reason to turn their camera on, right? It's just like an excuse. So that's cool.
And interesting that the level of comfort, right? Okay, when it's okay to record themselves and have it shown in Zoom, but maybe not necessarily as comfortable actually turning on their camera and participating in Zoom. But I think that really just speaks to the level of comfort that students have. I mean, we've heard from a number of students now that they're just really uncomfortable having their cameras on.
Yeah.
And
but oddly enough, this is kind of like a YouTube generation. Is that okay to say? Like so many, like my dream is to be a YouTube star. And so I get so many video responses. So I know there is comfortability with the technology and putting themselves out there, but it might need to be on their own terms. And sometimes
it's not live, right?
Yeah. So it's an access point. If they shared a recorded video live on Zoom, then maybe the next day they're more willing to, hit their camera on. We're all still experimenting with it at this point, but
Indeed.
some of these things are working, which is good to see.
Yeah, that's great. And I have to say, I've taught middle school and I taught high school, and I always gave students jobs. And so if you're teaching middle school and you're teaching high school and you're like, we don't give students them, try it, give them jobs. I mean, I had like high school seniors erasing the board for me, right? Because it's like, actually at any level, students want some sort of responsibility, and that does help build classroom culture. And the students know that this is very hard for teachers, and especially older students, I think, can really empathize with teachers who are having to learn and navigate all of these brand new systems. And so giving somebody a job really at any level is a completely appropriate way to engage them. And I think that's a great thing to consider. So camera on and a video, showing a video of yourself during Zoom is similar, and it might be the bridge to getting the camera on. So I love that suggestion.
That's good. And my favorite middle school science teacher ever said, never do anything a student can do. Like, that is not your job, because otherwise you're going to go crazy and you're going to be there until midnight every night.
Yeah.
So
It's true.
I'm still
And
learning
you're
that
right.
one. Such good advice. I need to put that on my wall and just look at it every day.
Oh, I love
had
the
a-
advice. I didn't always do it, but I loved it. Yeah.
I had a kiddo build a seesaw activity with me today. I've been trying to do
Nice.
one-on-one meetings at the end of each Zoom, and that's sort of another part of this. I'm trying to do more relationship building, maybe see if they are more comfortable with me and have that chance to check in, and not in such a large setting, but share a little bit of who they are. Maybe they'll be more comfortable in the Zoom meetings. And I just naturally started building a seesaw activity with a kiddo, and he loved it, and he loved seeing the behind the scenes of how to build a lesson that then was shared. And I thought, well, maybe that could work with Zoom too. Like, if they're doing some of the behind the scenes, they're more invested in how the Zoom meeting goes because they helped create it.
That's super cool.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. Awesome. Love it. All right. What else do you have? You've already given us so much.
Well,
Games.
just data. Oh, the games. So I made 5 lighthearted games. I was telling you guys earlier, I like to just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday it up and be like, every Monday we do this game, every Tuesday this game.
Oh,
and
nice. So every day you do a different game.
Yeah,
Oh,
and they're 5 minutes or less because we have kids going in and out of groups, and they're lighthearted, but they do require cameras on. I don't say require, but I say this game really works when our cameras are on. If you're someone who doesn't like to have your camera on, you can turn it on after, and they do just sort of naturally turn it on. I just weave that into the directions. So this one is fun and I think works for all ages. I turn the music on. They have 30 seconds to find whatever I announce. So maybe it's something smaller than, your fingernail or a scented candle, just everyday objects. And then they have to bring it back and be in their seats when the music is up. If they're not, they lose their seat. But they're still in the game because I don't want them to turn their camera off and leave. Yeah, so I'm like, you're still in the game. You just don't have your chair. And we keep playing however many rounds you want. You could do 2 rounds, 10 rounds. And then at the end, I pull out actually a stick and I announce what was the goal. Was the goal to still have your chair, or was it to have the most amount of items? That way it just keeps them playing if they get disheartened. Like, I don't have a scented candle. And it's like, you're still playing. You still might have your chair. And then all we win is a hearty round of applause. So we do the hearty round of applause, and it's just fun and quick. And kids love the scavenger hunt games. So this one has worked well.
I love that.
Is
Yeah,
really
that's such a
cool.
great idea.
I wonder if you could, I know a lot of teachers, they have had their students create Bitmojis, maybe not in elementary, but in middle and high school, it's super common. And so whoever wins the game the next day, their Bitmoji is on the slide deck for everything that you're doing in class. That would be so much
writing
fun.
this down. See,
Yeah,
I
idea.
need ways to
Yeah.
have incentives on Zoom because that is an area I'm not creative in. So I'm like, now we're applauding for ourselves. Okay, so what do? They get to have a Bitmoji slide.
Yeah, no. And then it's just like their Bitmoji is up on whatever slides you're showing in class. So
Oh,
it's like they're the
cool.
winner from yesterday.
Okay, I love that.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Maybe in Canva you
Awesome.
can create a little winner circle that's see-through, and then their Bitmojis in the middle of that. I don't know. Ooh, now I got to play with
have
that.
to follow
Yeah.
up on how to get
Okay.
the tech know-how to do this.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I'm
you
in
can come to our
Canva.
drop-in clinic.
I'm coming to that clinic
Yeah.
with my
Yeah,
Starbucks, I'm coming to
Awesome.
But
that.
I think you bring up an interesting point, which is incentives. Incentives in Zoom are really hard. And I think it puts teachers in a position where you're actually going to lean more toward being punitive to get students to participate than you want to be. And so like that is a really important consideration. Like in what ways can we incentivize students to participate? And I do think a game is a great way to do that. And so I agree with you. I think this game could be played at any age. And I think that you could mix up the task. Instead of finding something, maybe you're completing and showing something on your screen.
Great idea.
So I really like that. And the use of music, I think is helpful. Anything is helpful to break up, like just direct teacher talk in Zoom. So
I wish we had gotten whiteboards out to all kids so that they could like show things quickly.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Because think of all the fun things they would write and show us. It'd be so great.
That would be fun. That's again another one of those reasons to turn on the camera, right?
Yeah.
Just another thing.
Yeah, the whiteboard.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and if you don't have a whiteboard, I mean, you can use a piece of paper and a pen.
Yeah, and we've been doing a little bit of that too.
Yeah, the whiteboard is always going to be more fun.
It's just so fun.
Yeah, always.
Until
all right, that's great. Yeah, well.
It happens.
All right. Well, what else do you have for us?
Well, I have some data if you want some data.
All right.
Some pre-assessment data and post-assessment. I did actually ask our instructional coach, Steve Corinne, I don't know if you guys know him, to come in, and he had offered to just come to Zoom meetings and help with anything we needed. And I said, well, I've got a lot of kids with cameras off. And we're going to try to make some changes, but I'd like to see where we're at now. So he came in and he just recorded data for how many kids have their camera on during each section of the agenda. I had not even thought to ask for that. That was so useful. So like during this part of the meeting, you have more kids cameras on and this part less. And then he also recorded if they were participating. So their camera was off, but they typed in the chat or they, did a thumbs up electronically. So that was incredible to see, and big surprises there. There were things I just didn't realize were happening. There were some kids, for example, I thought were more engaged and were participating even though their camera was off. And then I found that really wasn't the case. Like in 7 out of 8 items, they didn't participate. So I did have that to compare with, and that's where I had that it's fluctuated depending on the part of the meeting, but between 6 and 8 kids who were having their camera on throughout the Zoom. So now we're up to over 13 per day. That's the lowest I've had since we've been doing this workshop and these games. That's not 22. I mean, I have 22 kids, but it's more than it was. And so I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to hopefully keep building relationships.
You're over 50%. So that's,
so it feels better. Just even having 4 or 5 more cameras on shifts the feeling and the tone of the meeting.
And again, I'm wondering about this culture piece. So the more students that have their screens on, I feel like more students will start doing that too.
Yeah, and we did have some deeper discussion questions in the Seesaw assignment where I asked, how do you think it makes a student feel if their camera is on, but they can't see anyone else's faces? To build in some of that empathy and thinking about, it's probably not that fun to have our camera on and be willing to share if all we're being met with is empty screens.
Yeah, that's true.
A little bit of there.
Well, Rebekah, what are your thoughts on teachers contacting parents and asking them to make sure that the child's camera is on?
I feel conflicted about that because I have 2 kids, a middle schooler and an elementary school age kiddo. My middle schooler does not like to have his camera on. And I feel like here's what happens sometimes. The teacher contacts the parent, tells the parent, we then go to our kid and we're like, why is your camera not on? Your camera needs to be on. And it's this like pressure. And so it might yield some results, but is it yielding a kid wanting to have their camera on? Is it yielding, willing participation? And where is the oversight? Because I'm working all day, my husband's working all day, so we can't go and check that the camera is still on. Now, that being said, there might be parents who are better at having those conversations and can inspire their kids and take that information from teachers and work all kinds of wonders. But for us, we did get that communication from teachers. We did have the conversation with our son, and I didn't see a huge amount of difference. So I guess it just depends. I don't have the exact answer on that. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I feel like, it's the student is going to do what the student, especially when they get to middle and high school. There's it's actually, if a parent goes and bugs them about it, they absolutely won't turn on their screen because I'm going to be defiant about it. And so I think give them a reason, like you're doing, playing the games, give them a reason to turn it on. Even just asking, just like, hey, it'd be really nice to see your faces for 10 seconds if you're willing to turn it on for just 10 seconds so I can see you and say hi. Something like that. I know.
Yeah, I think it being not all or nothing, saying there are times during the meeting where it's helpful for us to see each other. That was another discussion question. When we're playing a game, when we're discussing, if I'm showing a presentation or a slide, that's not as interactive. It's not as important if at that moment your camera is on or off.
Right.
Cassidy, you have kiddos who are also doing distance learning. Yeah. Do you have parents or teachers contacted you? Do you think it's helpful? How has that gone in your realm?
Well, I mean, the reason why I asked is because I just wouldn't want a teacher to think, from my experience as a parent and from what you're telling me, I just wouldn't want a teacher to think, well, I've notified the parents, that's enough. Mm-hmm. Right. Because I think what I hear you saying, Dustin, and I agree with you, is that this is a struggle. And I don't think we can assume that parents are able to supervise their children. I mean, I have children right now who are in Zoom as I speak, and I don't know if the cameras are on. I can go downstairs in a few minutes and I can ask them to, but then as soon as I walk away, I don't know if they'll go back off again. And I have seen teachers very effectively using that technique. Hey, cameras can be off right now, but I am going to ask you to turn them on when we have our discussion or when we go into the breakout room or whatever. But I do think that finding that, giving them a reason, and maybe the reason is they see that that's going to make the discussion go better if people have cameras on, especially in the older grades, older students. So.
And that
it's a tough one.
Issue of what you mentioned being punitive, cameras being turned off. Like my daughter sometimes has her camera turned off because she has a cat in her lap and that's not allowed, or, whatever it might be. And so I think that's a whole other maybe conversation about what is allowed when the camera is on. And if we're restricting a lot of things, like where you're sitting, you have to be at a table, you can't have a pet, you can't have a sibling, and you're making this whole list of things that kids cannot do when they're on camera because you're worried about distractions. That to me is not going to invite kids to have their camera on. And I know I'm in kind of a different space in that than other teachers, and we're not all in agreement on that, but I feel like give them reasons to want to have their camera on, not a list of reasons why that they're even more worried about. I'm going to be in trouble if I turn my camera on and my dog's in the picture. And so that's just
funny
another
hat day. What funny hat day? Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. But I do think we should communicate to parents about cameras, but not so much as like, please tell them to have their camera on, but more, here's what I'm noticing, are they sharing anything with you? Could I do anything to be helpful?
I was thinking like you said, just checking in literally with the student and having a quick little conversation, because you can make a little breakout room and just go into the breakout room with that one student and say, hey, I've noticed your camera has not been on for the last 3 weeks. Everything okay? Is there anything that you need? Is there a reason? Yeah.
That old I notice, I wonder. You can use that in a lot of different situations. So this is another good case for the I notice, I wonder. Well, we are almost out of time. Rebekah, you have been incredibly helpful and given us so many ideas and things to talk about. I'm really grateful for you donating your time to us to share your experience and your ideas with other teachers, and for letting us include those slide decks in the slide deck that we're going to share with teachers. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me come on, and even just in this conversation, I'm thinking of, new things I can do next week. I think it's something we're all trying to figure out as we go along. And I think this podcast is incredibly helpful because I didn't realize there was this larger platform for teachers to talk about all these issues we're facing right now and real-time solutions. So thank you guys for doing this.
So are you saying that if there was only like an hour that was set aside each week, that you could come together and just brainstorm ideas and bounce ideas of other professionals, how lovely that would be? We have that.
1,000,000%. Yes, I'm there. I'm signed up. I'm ready to come with my barking dog. I'm there.
I love it.
Awesome. Yeah. We
So-
won't even ask you to turn your camera off if your dog gets into the picture.
That's right. We won't. Your cameras or dogs and cat butts are perfectly welcome in our clinic time. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
All right. So on that note, we hope to see you on Thursdays between 3 and 4. And please shoot us an email if you have any questions or immediate needs for assistance.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.